issues.
There was a serious lack of female competition and teams.
Only 8% of participants using council sports grounds were female.
To address this inequality, Council introduced a policy to encourage clubs to be more inclusive of women, juniors, people with a disability and people from culturally diverse communities, or risk losing an allocation of a ground to a club that is being inclusive.
Female participation has now increased by 161% in Moreland.
West Merri-bek Football Club is proud to align with Moreland's policy.
This year we successfully launched the club's first ever under-12 girls footy team.
We're changing our club.
We're changing our culture.
I'm changing the game.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is John Kavanagh and I'm the Mayor of the City of Moreland. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's council meeting, for which council has to consider planning and related matters. Our meeting is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and elders from other communities who might be with us this evening. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland home. In doing so, they have contributed to the rich diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note that this meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors are reminded that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercising their responsibilities in the interest of the local community, and not to improperly seek or confer to advantage any person. This behaviour will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency disruption, we may be required to take action for the safety of attendees. Please follow directions of council staff. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Councillors in attendance tonight, we have Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Natalie Byrne, we have Councillor Dale Martin, Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Lambos Tapanos and Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Officers in attendance, to my left, your right, we have the Group Manager of City Development, Philip Priest. We have Unit Manager of Urban Planning, Narelle Jennings, Unit Manager of Governance, Libya Wright, or no, it's Sally Curran, the Governance Officer, Saskia Hunter, and Robert Chapel. All right, councillors, I note that we have leave of absence has been granted to Councillor Alia Farnley from the 17th of August to the 16th of September, and to Councillor Jess Dorney from the 22nd of August to the 19th of September. Could I note that we have an apology from Councillor Helen Davidson tonight? Apparently I don't need a motion for that, just to note it in the minutes, please. All right, adoption of the minutes. Could I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the Planning and Related Matters meeting that was held on the 25th of July 2018. Moved by Councillor Yildiz and the seconder, Councillor Abood. Any discussion on that? Being no discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare on tonight's two items? There being none. Okay, so we'll move on to the meeting. For those who are attending or tuning into live streaming for the first time, I'll give you an outline as to how the meeting will run this evening. The relevant planner will introduce the officer's report and the officer's recommendations. Then I'll give any objectors the opportunity to come to the lectern and make a submission for up to 3 minutes. After this, I'll give the applicant an opportunity to speak for also up to 3 minutes. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name and the street. You don't have to say your entire address. Please try to present your viewpoint on why you either support or oppose the planning application. Please try not to repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant points and matters. If you're opposing the planning application, you might like to inform the meeting as why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach that would satisfy your concerns. Please also use it to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. As indicated, there is a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as chairperson, I have the right to either increase or reduce time available. All right, so the officer's report, the first item we're dealing with tonight is DED 5218, 269 Stewart Street, Brunswick East. Planning permit application MPS 2018-157. I'll move to the officer to present the report.
Thank you, councillors, and good evening, councillors and members of the gallery. The first item for this evening is an application of 269 Stewart Street in Brunswick East. It's actually a repeat application. It's previously been to VCAT. Proposal before council tonight is for the development of the land to construct a Part 5 and Part 6 storey building with basement car parking and a roof deck containing a shop and 75 dwellings, use of the land for dwellings, removal of vegetation and a reduction of the standard car parking requirement. The subject site, councillors, is that parcel of land which is hatched in purple. It's Commercial 1 zone to the west of Ceres Street, northern side of Stewart Street. So it's Commercial 1 zone. It has a number of overlays over it, in particular the environmental significance overlay, which has been an issue as part of this application. In terms of planning policy basis, the site is outside of an activity centre, and this is unchanged from the previous application that went before VCAT. Clause 22013, neighbourhood character policy, is not technically applicable but does provide some guidance and in terms of how the land should be developed. The previous decision before VCAT referred to the Brunswick Structure Plan 2010 and 2012. That was ultimately dismissed by the tribunal, the reference documents. They hold little weight in the planning scheme. Since then, we also have Amendment C167. C167 was considered by the tribunal. Yes, it is a seriously entertained document, but it wasn't given much weight by the tribunal. In terms of the location and the context, councillors, the subject site is in the top left-hand corner. Adjacent to the site is Ceres and the entrance to the site. Down to the bottom of the page, you've got a view down Stewart Street, so view west, not east, down Stewart Street, the southern side of Stewart Street. The context is predominantly two-storey, but there is three-storey development to the west and to the southern side of the site. So, taking you to the previous application, councillors, so that went before VCAT last year. It was quite an interesting application. It was refused under delegation. It involved 109 dwellings. And we had 59 objections to that application. We have 49 objections to this application, councillors. That application was appealed to VCAT, and there were 6 objector parties to that appeal. The matter was set down for, I believe, half a day for a compulsory conference. It went for over 2 days. The parties eventually came to a resolution, but you may recall it was brought before council, and council ultimately determined to refuse the application. So it proceeded to VCAT, and VCAT again actually upheld council's decision. Substituted plans were submitted. Those substituted plans reduced the dwelling unit from 109 dwellings down to 100. But yet ultimately the tribunal, as I mentioned, it refused the proposal. But it did consider that a building up to 6 storeys may be able to be accommodated, subject to a number of changes. And that tribunal decision actually gave some guidance as to how you could potentially accommodate a 6-story building on the site. As I mentioned, 49 objections to this application. Obviously, considerable reference was given to the current proposal not adequately addressing VCAT decision, issues of concern with overdevelopment, neighbourhood character, and traffic. So in 2017, I've got some 2017 and 2018 plans, councillors, that will come up on the screen. The 2017 plans are the plans that went before VCAT. There were numerous changes that were made during the process, but these are the plans that were ultimately substituted and brought before the tribunal. So, as you can see, councillors, the basement car park, it extended very close to the northern and eastern boundaries. With the proposal, councillors, what we have is substantially increased setbacks off the eastern and northern boundaries. The purpose of that is to facilitate deeper landscaping. One of the things that the tribunal had mentioned in their decision was to accommodate a number of, I think it was 7 large canopy trees along the eastern boundary and 4 large canopy trees along the northern boundary. So again, this landscaping plan, as a result of the basement increasing, what we have is increased landscaping, particularly along the eastern boundary. The tribunal did mention it wanted to see more landscaping, but it also indicated in its decision that the building must stand by itself. It can't be reliant purely on the landscaping to enable it to be supported. So at ground floor, what we had previously were 4 commercial tenancies. The vehicular access to the basement car park was located on the western side. There was some contention about that during the tribunal hearing. As a result of proposed changes, that is now located on the eastern side next to Ceres. It's also, as a result, pushed the building back to ensure that the entrance to Ceres is open and accessed, and there's a clear idea to the premises. The building has also been set back at ground level. So it was previously 1.9 metres, and now it's set back at 4 metres. As we go up, councillors, again you'll see the setbacks from the side and northern boundaries. The changes substantially in terms of setbacks, councillors, are to the northern and eastern boundaries. So the northern boundary being to the left side of the screen, the eastern boundary being to the top. What we have there, councillors, in terms of the change is an increase from 4.1 metres to 6 metres along the northern boundary, and an increase from 2.6 to 6 metres along the east. The condition of the planning permit actually asks for the deletion of that part of the built form, so it's a further increase in the setback of those 2 apartments. So essentially, condition 1C asks for those apartments to be consolidated, and that applies to the upper ground floor and the first floor. We go up to the second floor, level 3. And again, we have condition 1B is actually asking for that setback to be increased to 11 metres. So that for the setbacks again there, so from the eastern boundary, there was an increase in setback from 2.8 metres to 6.3 metres. And from the northern boundary, previously it was 8 metres, and as per the condition, we're asking for a setback of 11 metres. Also asking for a setback on level 3 and level 4 of 11.5 metres along the eastern boundary. That's in part condition 1A. Third floor. Again, we have that 11.5 metre setback. So pushing the built form back. So the third floor, previously from the northern boundary we had a setback of 14 metres, so that's increased to 15 metres. From the eastern boundary it was 7.2 metres. It's proposed through the application plans at 9.4, but as I've indicated, the condition asks for 11.5 metres. We go to the top floor. See, it's pulled back. The tribunal asked for a substantial setback in terms of the depth of the upper floor from the northern boundary. We've actually asked for applied a condition to increase that setback further to 34 metres. So essentially, you'd see another 2 metres taken off that building. That's the tribunal actually talks about going no further than half the depth of the site. So use and elevation as proposed. That's the view from Ceres / the Merri-bek corridor as proposed. That section of the building is proposed by way of condition to be pushed back further. So councillors, the recommendation this evening before you is a recommendation is one of support for the application, subject to the conditions outlined in the recommendation. We're not here to make councillors, you're not here to make a decision on the actual application, rather just to put a position forward because it is a failure appeal to the court. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Good. Are there any objectors who would wish to speak? Yes, would you like to come to the lectern, please?
Councillors, Good evening, my name is Jo Barraquette. I'm the chairperson of Ceres Environment Park. I'm PhD qualified in political sociology and one of Australia's leading specialists in public policy. I am, however, not a specialist in planning, which will become apparent in a moment. As you know, Ceres is a not-for-profit association. All board members are volunteers to the organisation, and I can confirm that I've got no material interest in the matter before you this evening. You will have received on Monday written correspondence from Ceres that details the technical case that we put to you in an objection to the matter before you. I want to acknowledge on behalf of Ceres that we recognise the legal responsibilities of the council, and we also recognise that all councillors as well as council officers are operating in good faith in what is a complex matter that is operating in a dynamic policy environment. So we're very conscious of the complexity of the matter before you and appreciate that you are dealing with it in good faith. We believe, nevertheless, that we have put to you a clearly legally defensible and robust case in the technical matter, with regard to the technical matters that are set out for you in the written documentation. We have received informal legal advice from 3 different lawyers that the argument is indeed robust and legally defensible, and I'm not going to take the brief 2 minutes left I've got to go through all the details of that material.
Considering you're the chair, I'm quite happy to give you extended time.
Thank you very much. We did just simply want to acknowledge with regard to the substantive matters that we've put in the written documentation that 269 Stewart Street is well outside the defined corridor for intensive change as articulated in the current policy. The nearest section of this corridor has a preferred height of 11 metres. So we collectively find it incongruous that a building of 20 metres plus could be supported outside of that intensive growth area. Rather than use the time that I've got left to restate all of the information, I did want to stress 2 particular points on behalf of Ceres Board, Ceres members and the community that Ceres serves. These points we think are material both to the letter of current policy and legislation, but they're equally material to the spirit of effective local planning in a democratic society, which law reform would tell us has to be taken into account. While council officers and engineers are comfortable that driver awareness and traffic congestion associated with the development have been or can be attended to in the current proposal, regular users of Stewart Street and Robert Streets know better. Ceres sits on the corner of those 2 streets. It is not an ordinary residential place. Ceres receives nearly 500,000 visits per year, and the very large majority of those come through our main front gates. And the primary demographic groups that make up those visitors are local residents with young children and school-aged children who are attending Ceres on excursion. We really genuinely believe that the traffic volume and pathways created by the proposal represent a disaster waiting to happen with very real human threat to human life. As the chairperson of Ceres, I take that very personally and feel that that is my deepest concern as a responsible officer of the organisation. In terms of Ceres purposes, we exist to foster more sustainable and just ways of living in the world, and such a development is actually a contradiction to that purpose and our commitments to the very community that we seek to serve in our work. We also think that should such an event occur, this would endanger Ceres' reputation as a safe and inclusive place for young children, families and visitors to Melbourne. This would in turn endanger our substantial environmental and local economic contributions to the City of Moreland. We'd like you to take those matters into account. The second point is that 37 years ago, the Ceres site was degraded, neglected and a toxic place that no one wanted to live next to. A substantial proportion of the commercial value that will accrue directly to the developer is as a result of the sweat equity of thousands of Moreland residents who have worked for nearly 40 years to turn this place into an oasis that is loved by the community and known around the world. We really genuinely ask that Council not trade off this value for a proposal that is not sufficiently engaged with the needs of the community, as demonstrated by the developer's rejection of our proposed compromise and the many communications that we know you've received over the last few days. Councillors, Ceres believes in progressive change. We believe that that occurs not through fighting, and despite my grumpy, angry resident face well posed by the photographer in The Age on Sunday, we actually believe in constructive negotiation, and we believe that change occurs through relationships with people and through demonstrating what's possible. That's the essence of what Ceres is about. We've worked considerably with the developer over quite a long time now to come up with a solution that is both suitable to him and demonstrative of the unique characteristics of the site that he lives next, that the development will be next door to. Despite our best efforts, we haven't been able to reach a compromise position. So in this particular matter, Ceres stands on the matter with its members, its users, our neighbours, our friends and the many concerned residents of Moreland who've contacted you. We very much hope that based on your deliberations this evening that we'll be standing next to Council too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers, please? And I will enforce the 3-minute rule for everyone else. I will enforce the 3-minute rule for everybody else. I want to give the chair a substantial amount of time.
My name is Jenny and our family of 4 are residents in Kingfisher Gardens directly behind the development. I stand here again, as I did last year. Now I'm asking you to support us in negotiating a better outcome for the community than what is currently being offered. Last year, Councillor Helen Davidson commended residents for fighting the fight and noted that whilst it was a risk going to VCAT, it was a risk worth taking and one we could win as we had a good case. Other councillors commented that the amended plans, similar to the current submission, I might add, were a bridge too far and was still an inappropriate level of development, especially with regard to sensitive residential and creek interfaces. An alternative motion of 4 stories was put forward by Councillor Martin and noted as a more acceptable outcome. We've heard about all the reasons for objection, and after I read the report last Friday, which came to our notice after we visited VCAT, it feels like a simple ticking off of compliance with VCAT's reasoning behind the refusal, as opposed to a brand new assessment. This report is well written, however it does not ask or recommend any further tempering of the 6 levels, leaving our family feeling confused at some of the reasoning. If it was that simple to comply with, why was a permit noting those conditions not issued last year by VCAT? It has been suggested by the developer that residents simply don't want change and are saying not in our backyard. That's not the case. We want, as VCAT suggested many times in the report, a design that responds to the context. Policy that confused VCAT last time has been, has been clarified and supports less intensive development of this site. It was previously given limited weight due to conflicting information. Ceres, with all objectors we've already heard, put forward a compromise, but that was rejected and the developer elected to fight it out at VCAT. We think it's outrageous that a building 20 metres in height is well out with anything in the nearest activity centre boundary, and it does not show respect for sustainable or strategic development on the edge of the Merri Creek Valley. Brunswick is already shouldering a large percentage of Melbourne's expected population growth within planned strategic corridors. Why does this off-corridor development on a residential side street need to be this intensive and this high? Please, I urge you again to uphold the decision made by councillors last time and support us. Don't just issue the permit, take the risk with us again. Let's roll the dice at VCAT with council on the side of the people, not the multi-million-dollar developer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the submission. Do we have any other objectors that would like to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Farquhar. I'm not a resident, but I'm a frequent visitor to Ceres. I submitted an email to councillors, and that email was based on a reading of VCAT, and in particular I caught the words that a 6-storey residence might be approved based on those conditions, and that has been pointed out. But I think that word may is certainly the key word, because it certainly wasn't a sign of approval. Is Rod Duncan in the room? Rod, since I sent my email, I've received a letter from Rod also explaining that VCAT's recommendation or even discussion was based on a document that indicated that the land site itself was appropriate for approval, for approving a development like this on. But that since then, that document has been shown to be out of date, and that the site itself is not appropriate for this scale of development. So if the very foundation of VCAT's recommendation was that a 6-storey building may be able to be built, was predicated on false information, then surely the VCAT decision can only be shown to have been one made in mistake and in error. And so, although the developer should be commended for producing certainly a scaled-back development from what was originally put forward, that we cannot in any way assume that VCAT was actually endorsing the development of 6 storeys if the information they were using for even suggesting that it was possible was incorrect.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers? Yes.
Hello, my name's Denise Kalki. I'm a resident. I live in Victoria Street, around the corner from Ceres. Look, I'm just an ordinary resident. My 16-year-old son wanted to come too, but he had a migraine. My neighbour around the corner wanted to come, but she's just had a piece of cancer removed today, so that wasn't going to happen either. We all understand the need for increased density in housing in our area. I mean, as you know, our Brunswick has gone nuts with building everywhere. I haven't been able to drive into my street for about 2 years, but that's okay because, you know, I and my neighbours and my friends understand that we need to do this. But I guess when it comes to this proposal, it just seems like a step too far. It seems like too much. I mean, 6 storeys is too much. And as Brunswick and, you know, surrounding areas become more built up, it's more reason to protect the green spaces that we have. And Ceres is one of those green spaces. Ceres is one of those places that you can go to and all of a sudden you're not quite in the heart of the city anymore. It's a place where you can relax a bit, where you can hang out with neighbours, where you can kind of imagine you're in a different place in a different time in a kind of contemporary way. And we would really like to keep it like that. And I think that the proposal as it stands at the moment is just going to take away from that atmosphere and from our quality of life. So I would really urge you, I haven't looked into a whole lot of detail about what the current policy around this is. I believe there is some question around it. So, at a starting minimum, I would say that, any development needs to be in line with policy. Even if this is within policy, just from a resident's point of view, I would just urge you to just put a little bit of a break on this, just not quite so much, please. And we will just all be a whole lot happier about living where we live. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other speakers? Yes.
Hello, Robert O'Leary from Stewart Street. I be living across the road from the development, and sort of to echo what you've already heard in regards to the size of the property and the height that's going to be there. It's about the fact that this development will dominate the view from no matter where you are around. And as we've just heard, there are a lot of development already happening along the Nicholson Street. We've got increased density happening everywhere in the area, and I don't feel that another 6-storey building in a quiet residential street is going to help that area in any shape or form. The closest buildings to us that have been recently developed have a height of 4 levels, so I still can't understand how we can say in a quiet street, not the main street, 6 levels is acceptable.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Good evening. My name's Anthony Merchant. I'm a resident of Stewart Street. I live next door to Robbie. The main point that I think everyone I would like you to consider is that the building that is being proposed at the moment is, in my mind, pretty much identical to the building that Council last year said was not good enough. The plans that have been shown up there, where all the haircuts have been happening, that was from the VCAT plans that was submitted by the developer, which actually increased from 90 units to 100 units, so expanded the plans back out again and took that to VCAT. So yeah, that's my main point, is that if basically the same building wasn't good enough last year, it shouldn't be good enough this year, even now that it's 1 metre taller. It's kind of the main complaint I think everyone has is the scale of the thing, and 6 stories, and then I think if 20 metres saying that one extra metre is okay, it's a 5% increase, and that's a lot. And it's what people are going to see, and they're going to see more, and it's not acceptable. I think this size, and as everyone has said before, it's the place. There's the Tontine factory, I think, is the only other 6-storey thing going, and that's on Nicholson Street, which is a wide, big 4-lane street. There's plenty of space and there's room to breathe. But you put this 6 stories in Stewart Street, and you're going to feel like you're driving down like a rat in a maze. It just does not belong there. I think I'd probably speak for most people. The building that's currently there is ugly, and the day we moved into our apartments, we thought, hopefully that will go soon. So no one's against change, but it has to be reasonable. And as the VCAT, I don't know how, I wanted to count, but I didn't get around to reading it, but the word that kept coming up is contextual and context and context. And when the context is 1, 2 and 3 bedroom houses everywhere, how can 6 stories be in context just because some trees are in front and it's shaved back? And the plans showed the little man looking up, and that, it'll only look like 3 stories because you look here and they've drawn the line, but you walk 10 metres to the side and there's going to be 6 stories. It's only going to look, if you're standing right in the middle of the building, that perspective illusion will work. But driving up Robert Street, driving up Ryan Street, driving along Stewart Street, you will see this titanic, gargantuous building there. There's no hiding it. Trees can't hide it, nothing's going to hide it, and it's just the wrong place for it. And the other issue is the actual amount of new cars and people that building will put in. I think someone said it'll almost double the amount of what is currently there. And people have said before that the extra traffic and the sensitivity of the young kids and parents going to series, it's got to be taken into consideration.
Thank you very much.
That's my
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Any further speakers? Yes.
My name's Andre Cotton. I've been a resident of Brunswick for almost 36 years. And over that time, I've watched development blossom, shall we say. And we rarely speak of amenity, and we rarely speak of precedence. And what this is doing is maintaining the newfound precedence where they're building oversized buildings inside streets. The growth corridor was supposed to be in Lygon Street, and now this, I don't know the wording, it's a kind of a cancer. And when you allow a building of this magnitude in a small little street, no matter where, within the community, you destroy the amenity and you set a precedence to allow more and more of this type of development. Because that's what's used in VCAT. When you get a 6-story building in a side street, you get a 7-story next time. And that just continues. And you have the ability to voice that we want to maintain some semblance of civility for the residents of the community.
Thank you very much. Any further objectors? Who would like to speak? All right, there's no further objectors. I'll ask, is there an applicant or representative of the applicant here? Thank you.
Councillors, my name is Panos Multiadu. I've presented to you before on this project and one previously. I just want to talk to you today, not necessarily about the development, but about the process and how confusing this is for any developer or applicant. We didn't put this into the structure plan. It was put there when we bought the site 2 years ago. We didn't zone this site commercial. It was commercial when we went there. Your own policy at that point in time said that it could take 4 as preferred and based on substantial land mass, potentially take more. We sat in pre-application meetings here 2 years ago with your planners who advised us of the same thing. We submitted plans, permits, worked with consultants to try and establish acceptable, let's call it grounds, for this to be something that complements the community complement series. That was agreed to by objectors through this process. And, you know, I've been challenged in terms of why we weren't prepared to negotiate. Well, we did. We had 57 people accept, including series, and then came to this same meeting 12 months ago and had those same people talk against the development. So in terms of the way we approached this, we took this to VCAT. I think Council took an approach at that point to say, well, is it too far? Is it too big? There's all these questions that you had in relation to this. And it went to VCAT for 5 days. It was represented legally by Council at that point in time as well, and there was a suite of consultants that presented to the VCAT member, and not just a single member, there was 2 members there over the course of those 5 days. They determined the site. They understood the objectives' points of view, the community's points of view, Council's points of view, our points of view, and put a position forward in what is a 20-page descriptive document. It's there, it's been interpreted by your planners in the same way we have. We have looked at the conditions that council planners have put forward, and we're very comfortable with those because it talks to the VCAT decision. We're not sitting here saying we disagree. The way it's been articulated in the context of some of the setbacks, we've interpreted it in exactly the same context and are very happy to implement as part of it. So over a 2-year journey, we've gone through a process for both council, for both objectors, who probably weren't aware of the zoning in their own right until the application came, to educate people. As it's been a difficult process for everybody, including us, we've carried the site now for over 2 years to try and understand what it could be in the context of this confusion. We have clarity. That's why we went to VCAT. VCAT has talked to the amendments and the changes and has put weight on that and indicated the significance that they've placed on structured documents and changes to it. Changes were afoot in April based on the result of us putting in this application last year. So let's call it policy on the run to try and fix. It's only fair that you consider this application in the context for what it is. The way VCAT have determined it in terms of zoning, how we determined it in terms of when we bought the site. We ask you to consider the many good things that we're trying to do as part of it, but I fear that'll fall on deaf ears. And I ask you to accept there's been over 200 hours by our calculation of planning considerations for it. That being said, Lucent Capital's my legacy, it's my business, it's my passion, it's my pride. It's exactly the organisation that I want to be part of because we're going to do good things. We're not the evil developer coming into this community. We are going to contribute 75 families to this community who are going to benefit from Ceres, who are going to play a role in this community moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just before you go, does you have a question for the applicant? Yeah.
I was wondering why you didn't consider the compromise proposal to pull the height down.
Great question. When we went through the process the first time around with the community in general, we met one-on-one with many people living in Kingfisher. We met with Ceres. We went to at least 5 consultative meetings with Ceres. And then we obviously went through a compulsory conference where we were able to culminate a lot of that discussion into a facilitated arrangement. So VCAT did the compulsory conference, it was facilitated, and all those bits and pieces came together over 3 separate days and over 20 hours to culminate in an outcome. And I was quite proud of that. And if you looked at, I don't know whether you have, at what we agreed to in terms of the amended plans versus where we are now, yes, it's different. This is smaller, but in a lot of ways it was driving to this outcome. In the second interim, having had the same people that signed this agreement stand here last time and say they were unhappy with it and had suggestions that maybe we imposed ourselves, we thought we've got VCAT as a decision. We weren't going to engage a second time round and potentially get to an agreement that people walk from. That was our logic.
Yes,
I don't sort of feel like you really answered the question. Did you ever consider, because obviously a 6-storey building in this location was always going to upset the community because of the location beside the creek and beside Ceres. Did you ever consider lowering the height of the building?
Yeah, I mean, when you design a building, you design it 1 level, 2 level, 3 level, 4. So yeah, we've had a look at all different scenarios of it being a 4-level iteration. We've looked at it being a 5-level iteration. We've looked at it being a 6-level iteration. So the answer to your question is yes, we've looked at all those iterations. There's a commercial reality associated with those connotations. Land rate, what land's going for in Brunswick and Brunswick East, and then what you can do in the context of development. If you consider the development corridor, again, full of facts and figures that I am, You're paying $5,000 a square metre for land in the development corridor because you get 6 levels. This land was purchased at $2,500 a square metre and subsequently can only carry 75 apartments versus 1,700 square metres in the development corridor carrying 66 apartments. So in the context of land mass to scale, this is no different in the context to reduced scale and then the commercialities associated with getting a feasible outcome. So the answer to your question is yes, we did. And from a feasibility perspective, no, we couldn't get it to work at a lower level.
Any other questions for the applicant? Did I hear you correctly when you were talking about the zoning, right? And you said 4 levels is the preferred zone?
In the structure plan, back in 2010, 2012, it indicates in a coloured that preferred 4 level. It indicates based on land size, it may accommodate more.
That's right. Yeah. But the 4 levels is the preferred.
Preferred can accommodate more based on land mass.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. All right. Any questions for the officers? Okay. Do I have a motion? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair Kavanagh. I'd want to put an alternative motion to the meeting regarding this application. I'll second.
Okay, and it's the one that's been circulated?
Yes, the one that's been
Okay, so councillors are aware what they're seconding?
Yeah, and I'd like to read it if I may.
Of course. Councillor Tapanos is your seconder, so please read it.
It's relatively short, so I think reading it would be very helpful, particularly to the those present in the gallery. So you all realise it's for 269 Stewart Street. I won't go into all those details, but the motion reads the council resolves that the council notifies the tribunal and all objective parties of the application that if it were able to make a decision on the application, its decision would be the refusal to grant a planning permit to MPS/2018/157 for the construction of a Part 5 and Part 6 storey building with basement car parking and a roof deck containing a shop and 75 dwellings, use of the land for dwellings, removal of vegetation and a reduction in the standard car parking requirement on the following grounds. 1. It's written up there for those who can see it, but I will continue to read it. The design response fails to meet the objectives of Clause 43.01, Schedule 1, Environmental Significance Overlay Merri Creek Corridor. The building's height, scale and materials do not sufficiently address the previous VCAT order and impose an unreasonable visual impact on oblique views from the Merri Creek Corridor, contrary to the objective of Clause 43.01, Schedule 1, Environmental Significance Overlay. It's to ensure that the scenic qualities and visual character of the waterway corridor are not compromised by the inappropriate siting of the buildings. 2, the building height is inconsistent with the strategic framework for urban intensification outside of an identified activity centre as established by the Moreland Planning Scheme. And 3rd, the upper level building envelope provides insufficient setbacks from the northern and eastern boundary to protect the visual outlook and amenity of existing residents and future residents of the proposed building as recommended in the 2017 VCAT order bracket P661/2017 close bracket. Thank you.
Okay, that's the motion and you have a seconder, so you're welcome to speak to it.
Thank you. In speaking to the motion, many of the points have been made tonight by presenters, objectors, and I thank them for those contributions. As people are aware, this site is unique, and I'll come to a little bit more about the site, but it's on the east side, the corridor of the creek and series. It's a public park recreation zone. On the north side, it's a neighbourhood residential zone, and on the west and south sides, it's a mixed use zone. The site itself is a commercial 1 zone, and unfortunately, it came to my, only being in this job less than 2 years, it was a great disappointment for me to find that this site did not have any particular provisions applying to it outside of the activity centres where most of these commercial 1 zones are located in our city. I've been referring to this as somewhat of an anomaly when I've been talking to people, and so that's why the motion is referring to our broader planning scheme, because we have to look to that without those particular provisions which usually guide zones like this. On the negative side, this doesn't always, this application as it came to us, as you can see in the officer's response, doesn't address all of the matters in the VCAT decision. Hence, there are a number of conditions that the officers and Robert, officer actually spoke to that and pointed out quite eloquently what else was missing from council's point of view. One of the plus sides is that it's gone down to 75 dwellings after it's been 109. However, there were further conditions, and with those extra conditions, people need to be aware that potentially up to 4 or 5 more dwellings would be going if they were to be adopted by VCAT. On a negative side, there were need for greater setbacks. On a positive side, they provided for many of those with more deep-rooted dwellings, deep-rooted plantings and landscaping, just in summing up, this site and the valley that this site sits in is unique, and has been expressed tonight. Ceres has spent 37 years, and the Friends of Merri Creek and the Merri Creek Management Committee have spent more years developing that creek and returning it to somewhat of its original sort of state, when it was actually a drain and a sewer and a toxic wasteland. So that value needs to be acknowledged. It's a biosphere. It's a whole bio corridor, and we need to be doing what we can to protect that. So the sight lines for this site and the eastern views are really important as far as we're concerned, and that's what this motion is about. The height is inconsistent with the overall planning scheme that's been referred to, and the framework for the medium density and high density developments under the activity centres don't apply, but needs to be taken into account in our broader site. And just finally, the upper levels require further setbacks to provide that amenity for existing residents and future residents, and we want to protect the visual outlook that they are having to live with as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tabernos.
So thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be quick because I think Councillor Riley has covered it quite adequately. But just to say that if you were to walk down Kingfisher and Stewart's, and even from Ceres, and have a look at what is in the surrounding area, and look at the neighbourhood character, you will notice that this type of apartment sort of construction up to 6 stories is significantly out of character. And that no resident and no passerby who actually looks at the site would say that this is an adequate spot for such a tall building. And you know it's an overdevelopment when it requires so many conditions, even in our officers' reports, to actually make it comply with most of the planning scheme. And even then, there's still areas that are grey, there's still areas of non-compliance. So for me, it is obvious that this is an overdevelopment of the site. There is no doubt that we are going to get a development here of some magnitude, because it is a large parcel. But I think 6 stories is way too high, and something like 4 stories would be more appropriate. I also feel that the zone is not the zone that this should really be in. That is something that is historical, but really it should have been changed into a residential zone, which would match what is in the surrounding area. So I think that is something we should pursue as a council into the future. And if we did have that, even a residential zone like Grove Zone, which is the most you would see, would be something like 4, and I think that would be kind of adequate. So I think it needs to be said that there's some additional benefits here from the application when it first came to us, and some good work has been done through the process. But for me, there is still a conversation to be had and a process still to follow, and I would like to see that we advocate quite strongly at VCAT for a better outcome than what is before us tonight. So I'm urging a refusal for that purpose, and I hope that our views are heard at VCAT and heard by the developer, and we can work together with the community to get something of a smaller scale, less visual bulk, and something that's going to really enhance the area.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Bolton.
I'd like to say a few words. While a development of this scale may be legally allowed, I feel that a developer that was really sensitive to the local community would recognise that there would be a community reaction to have a development of this scale right beside Ceres, right beside the creek. And I do think these areas is pockets of open space, especially along the creek, are very precious. We do need some parts of our busy city where people can, go for quiet enjoyment and enjoy nature, etc. I also feel that one of the objectors raised a very important point, and that is that this will create a precedent. And since I've been on this committee, when it was called the Urban Planning Committee, very frequently a justification for particular building sizes is the fact that there's a precedent further down the street. That's more in the context of structure plans where there's a preferred height and there's a justification that building can go above a preferred height because there's a precedent down the street. And I think this would be a massive problem if this development goes ahead at this size. It means every other building along that street, every other house along that street could potentially be developed to this sort of level. So I do think that this sort of size of building needs to be kept to the major thoroughfares and not in the small streets, and especially one like this, which was always going to get a reaction from residents because the Ceres is such a treasured area and the area along the creek is so treasured.
John. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Yildiz.
Can I just make a few comments? I want to acknowledge the CEO of Ceres, Cinnamon Evans, who's here tonight as well. But I want to thank all those concerned residents who sent the 3,700 emails to us. It's worked. We must, I really do believe that we must preserve the unique open space of Ceres. And if you think about where Ceres is, it's a landmark. Wherever you go in Australia, they talk about what we've done, or what Ceres have done in and around Stewart Street. But 6 stories, 75 apartments, roof deck, basement, car park development. For this area, it really is that scale of development, I don't believe, and the density is not suited to this area. Overshadowing, traffic issues, infrastructure strain on the utilities, and also the car parking reduction and the constraints that's going to cause in and around that area. It will definitely impact Ceres, no doubt about it. And the key things for me tonight were the fact that it's outside the activity centre. It had 59 objections the first time I went to VCAT. It's now got 49 objections. So the residents are quite concerned if they we wouldn't have so many objections over the two processes. It is definitely overdevelopment, and I think it will impact on what's there currently, but it will also impact potentially on our future generation. The amount of kids from schools that go to Ceres, to see this monstrosity while you're there, and I've taken visitors from all over the world to Ceres, I don't think that's suited to this area. So I congratulate Councillor Mark Riley and Lambros for sticking up for this, and I will be voting for this amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor.
Thanks. So I rise to join my fellow councillors and support the refusal. I would like to make the point that I don't think this building is a monstrosity. I recognise that the work the officers have done and the developers and the architects as well, I do recognise that it is actually quite a good building. There's solar, 7.5 star neighbours, increased setbacks, deep root planting. You know, the number of 3 bedrooms in the development is actually really good. And to be perfectly honest, if this was in the activity centre, I'd be probably standing up asking all other developers to copy it and to really push it forward. The unfortunate nature of this particular site is that it is an anomaly. It is, the building is probably 2 stories too high, and if it was 4 stories, I think we'd probably all be standing around supporting it. At the moment, just the interface between the mixed use zone and the neighbourhood res, it is too great. And I think as well, something that is a concern for me is the 100 car spots that are in there and the traffic concerns, and also the fact that we have gone out and we're still seeking feedback from the community on our Moreland integrated transport strategy at the moment. So I would encourage people to make submissions to that, but it is those sort of things that we see that we're trying to achieve, and unfortunately this development doesn't quite meet them, but I do encourage the developer to go back to work with us, to work with residents, because I don't feel that it is that far away. It is just that little bit too high. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Booth.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also stand to support the amended recommendation, but I also would like to acknowledge and echo Councillor Martin's comments about the conversation that has been happening for years about the development. And there's a lot of stuff that really impresses me about the building, especially the size of the apartments, the deep root planning. We just don't see that sort of stuff, and it's what makes all the difference. But I also wanted to acknowledge that there were between 90 points and sub-points added to the recommendation that were tweaking the detail of the development, even once it was being recommended to be approved. And when we looked at it and saw all of that detail and wondered if we could take any height off the building as well, it was unrealistic to try and put that many changes on the plan without just rejecting it outright. So I hope that the same as last time we were in the chamber and we talked about this development, VCAT, when faced with this decision, which has already been scheduled, will understand, and support the position of the council. But I just wanted to really draw attention to the strain that the planning system in this state is putting on everybody. It's putting strain on developers, it's putting pressure on community, it's putting pressure on planners, and sometimes I even think it's pretty hard as a councillor. But at the end of the day, you make a decision and you stick by it. We've looked at this very unique building proposal in this very unique site, and it's just too tight to be able to let it go through. So I hope that the developer panel, so I hope you realise that I feel like I've said this to you before. The quality of the development is great, it's just too high and there's too much bulk for such a tight little neighbourhood with such a treasured piece of land. People have been bringing this piece of land back from a tip. We're now at a position in the South Ward, we're doing as much as we possibly can to buy land that isn't for sale in that end of the city to provide more open space. So with that as part of our rhetoric, we really need to protect the open space that has been nurtured for so long. Especially along the creeklands, the environmental significance along that waterway. It's in Plan Melbourne that the waterways are super important. And so while I really appreciate the energy and effort that officers and the developer have gone to, I just will definitely be supporting that, the recommendation that VCAT accept a refusal on this application.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Any further speakers? Okay, being no further speakers, I'm going to put the motion to the vote. That's the motion that's moved by Councillor Riley and seconded by Councillor Tapanos. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. I'll go to the officer for the next steps from here.
Thank you, councillors. The Urban Planning Committee has resolved to advise the Victorian and Civil and Administrative Tribunal that it does not support the application, and subject to the grounds contained in the alternative recommendation on the screen, and will be notifying VCAT accordingly of that. The matter is scheduled for a hearing on the 19th of November for 5 days, and objectors who have lodged a statement of grounds with VCAT will have the opportunity to address the tribunal. Those objectors who have not lodged a statement of grounds, if you would like to be a party at VCAT, you will need to make direct contact with VCAT. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item tonight is DED 5318. That's 11 Van Doon Court, Oak Park, and 11 and 11A, Van Doon Court, Oak Park. Planning permit application, MPS 2017 673. And we'll just give a moment for people to make their way out, and then we'll hear from the officer report. All right, no worries. Whenever you're ready, is it you, Robert? Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors. The second item for this evening is an application at 11 and 11A Baldoon Court in Oak Park. It's for the construction of 4 double-storey dwellings. The subject site, as seen on the screen, is in a neighbourhood residential zone. It's to the immediate north of the Bryant Family Reserve. It's a public park recreation zone, and it's quite an odd shaped site. It's very deep, has an abuttal to multiple properties. As you'll see in the aerial photo, the adjoining properties have an open rear yard character. It's also in an area of cultural heritage significance. The existing conditions of the site, so the site is 1,180 square metres. At the rear of the existing single-storey dwelling are 2 bungalows. There's also a swimming pool and a garage. The site is known as 11 and 11A Baldoon Court, but it comes up as one title. During the application process, there were a number of objections. It went through a PID, and as a result of the PID, the applicant came back and made some modifications to the plans. Those modified plans are referred to in the recommendation. Those plans weren't formally substituted as part of the application process. The plans on the screen are those plans which have been formally that are being referred to tonight. Those plans have also been circulated to all objector parties. So as a result of the change, with the revised plans, there were a number of changes, but the first floor areas were decreased, and dwelling 1 and dwelling 4 went from 4 bedrooms down to 3 bedrooms. We also saw, as a result of that, there was some concern by officers in terms of the separation of first floor. As you can see, between dwelling 2 and dwelling 3, it was 1.75 metres. Between dwelling 3 and dwelling 4, I think it was just over 2 metres. Those setbacks have now been increased to 3 metres. So to create some a sense of openness and outlook. In terms of the cladding materials, councillors, it's hip roof, brick veneer, ground level, horizontal weatherboards at first floor, and some use of a veranda. Each dwelling also has 2 car parking spaces. Dwellings 1, 2 and 3 have a double garage. Dwelling 4 has a carport. It's also substantial open space. If I just quickly go back, dwelling 4 has, I think it's about 170 square metres of secluded open space. In terms of objections, there were 12 objections received. The key themes that came out of that were neighbourhood character, overlooking, overshadowing, and a common theme of car parking and traffic. The officer's recommendation to the council tonight is one of support for the proposal, subject to some further amendments to the plans, the sketch plans that were submitted. That includes an acoustic fence, a detailing of the acoustic fence along the boundary with 13 Baldoon Court, which is to the northwest of the site, at a height of 1.9 to 2.5 metres. That's to address some of the concerns that were raised by the owner of number 13. Some additional privacy screening to the balcony for dwelling 4 at the rear of the site to prevent overlooking, and some landscaping along the common access way. Thank you, councillors.
Good. Thank you very much, Robert. Any objectors who would like to speak tonight?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Patricia. I am currently, my husband and I are currently building at number 5 Baldoon. We've lived in the Pascoe Vale area for a number of years, and the last property we owned was on Sim Street, and we were behind a already developed townhouse, and we had a number of concerns with the person who was renting the property was exposing himself on a number of occasions. I felt closed in. I felt like I was choking. So we did build a lovely home, 2 stories. We decided to move. We found a beautiful place, number 5 Baldoon Court, and we loved the area. We knew that there was already a precedent, and I love that word, precedent, set in place with a number of, just on the top of the court there were 7 proposed units. Thankfully, it went down to 4 townhouses, which are still 2 years on, still being built. We're building a single-storey family home. It is a family-oriented court. This is going to set a precedent. You here present represent us. not real estate agents, not developers. You represent the people. And there are a number of people here, elderly residents of Valdoon, who couldn't make it, who are away, who are contacting us to make sure that someone is present representing them. It sickens me of the greed of developers in the area of Moreland. I've lived in the area of Moreland all my life, 50 years, and I've never seen it the way. I feel as if it's going to combust. I feel as if I'm living in, I know it's a bit out of character, but, in New York City. If you've ever been to New York, I feel as if I'm being choked in. The traffic, the poor garbologists that are going to try and pick up all of the rubbish, these families that are moving into these huge houses, 3-bedroom houses, are going to have children. They're going to come in with 2 cars. One day, they're going to have more than 2 cars in that area. So I'm pleading with you as a member of Moreland to knock this back or make some amendments to this plan. I'm not looking forward to living in an area where I'm going to see this continue. And it is. It's all about precedence and it's all about greed.
Thank you very much. Any other objectors like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Inez Barrett. I'm co-owner of number 13, Valdoon Court. My husband and I moved there 18 years ago. We gutted the house. We have we've renovated. We put in a swimming pool. We at the moment are extremely concerned because one of the things that wasn't listed was privacy. There are a lot of things that we have objected to, but one of the things mainly would be the overlooking into our property. The units are very close to our fence line. At the moment, we have a brick wall that has been discussed, but it creates a lot of privacy for our backyard. Once that wall's knocked down, we're totally exposed. There was discussion at the last meeting that it would be raised to 3 metres, but through the minutes and everything, that has been knocked down to 2.5. So there's a lot of things that were discussed at the last meeting, but there was variation in the minutes that actually were forwarded to us. One of the things, though, that I would really like to present tonight was a conversation that I had with one of the planning officers. And when I go back and reflect on that meeting or that conversation that I had with the person, I find it really difficult to think that this development is even being considered. When I spoke to that person, she came down and did a site inspection. And the conversation that took place on the phone afterwards was she believed that the parking was not going to be an issue in the court, possibly. She believed that the proposed development would be out of character for the court. She described it as spoiling the quaintness of the court. She felt 4 townhouses are not in line with the current housing heights and styles. She claimed that we were fortunate that a new house being built in the court was a single story, and that was not setting precedents. She questioned the frontage of the front townhouse, and she agreed that it should be suggested to push the front townhouse back. She felt that the four double-storey townhouses would be out of character for the court. Quoting the planning officer, "I think it's too much." She explained that the 4 double-storey could be allowed, but she felt again it would be out of character for the court. She commented that there is a gradient on the block of number 11 and fences would have to be higher than the proposed. We also spoke about the brick wall and the hazard and the legality that would be attached to having that wall there. We are, as you can appreciate, very disappointed and concerned. We put a lot of money and effort into making our home our home. Our court is very quaint, it's beautiful. having something like a four two-storey townhouses next door and in the court would just be totally out of character.
Thank you very much. Any other objectors like to speak?
My name's Michael Barrett. I'm at number 13 as well. I acknowledge some of the alterations that have been done. They're in the right direction, but they're very minor. Nothing has been addressed in terms of neighbourhood character. Every resident no resident believes that double storey in that court is part of the neighbourhood character and fits in. There was even talk at the last meeting that the front unit could be made to look like a single storey, but in the changes nothing's been addressed. Ideally the front one should be all of them could be single storey, but at least the front one. My wife's mentioned with the wall. Bins are already an issue. There's been talk of having a private collection for the new development, but like everything, nothing gets done unless it's in writing, and it's not in writing. It's proposed, but it's not nothing. It says it could be, but it's not in writing. At the moment, there's 3 cars at the property. Already one of them is on the road. So hence they're starting to put their bins on our nature strip, which the garbage people asked me 17 years ago, please don't put it on yours. It's a small nature strip, it's on the elbow of a court, it's got a tree in the middle, and there's also a power pole. They asked us to put ours on number 15, and now we've already got bins coming across. Miles from number 9 can't be here today, but he asked me to mention that he again was considering solar panels, which is out the question now, if it's a double storey. And also, he's by having a double storey, he's going to have to outlay extra money and relocate his total outdoor entertainment area because it's going to be in full shade. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Hi, Leon Twee, owner of 140 Vincent Street. Just a quick one and a clarification. If we refer to attachment 3 as per the mayor's plans, just in regards to privacy along, I guess, number
13?
Probably 13, the bottom one, and also 140, which is the back of my property. Now, you've got some, what was it, privacy or some screening along the back balcony. Just wondering about clarification for height and depth or width, so to speak. All of those windows along that side, I guess, because obviously townhouse 3, you'll also be able to see into the back.
I'll get the officer to address that when you're finished here. Okay.
It's all about pretty much just privacy again.
Okay.
Obviously.
Okay, so I'll ask, are you able to answer that, Robert?
Thank you, councillors. Yes, look, along the southern boundary of the balcony for dwelling 4, that will need to be screened to achieve the requirements of the planning scheme in terms of overlooking. So there will need to be a 1.7 metre high screen erected, and that will come down to come down. It's going to be hard to see, sorry, councillors, but yes. It comes down to in line with the, as I recall, the edge of the walk-in road to the bedroom. So it's probably about 1.5 metres to the south, so down towards the bottom. So if you start from the top end of the balcony and you come about 1.5 metres down, be to there. So when you do the overlooking provisions of the planning scheme talk about a 9 metre arc. At 45 degrees, so at the moment it provides overlooking through into the back of a number of properties. Numbers 15 and 16 Flannery Court at present. So that screen will actually prevent any overlooking. So the only overlooking in from that balcony will be into the reserve.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Robert. Any other objectors that would like to speak? Yeah.
Hi.
My name's Rudy. I live in 15 Baldoon Court. Look, this is a bit extemporaneous because I wasn't going to speak today, but I feel compelled to, given what I've heard. I think this is essentially a microcosm of what's happening in Melbourne, this untrammelled development at any costs, high density. I think this is essentially being driven by return on investment. It seems to be now the sort of a religion now in terms of getting maximum return on investment. But the essential feature is for this court is, what is the court? What does it represent? Well, it represents, apart from family, it represents serenity. And serenity is correlated with how many dwellings you have in the court. Now, 4 townhouses, double, I think is untrammelled development. When we first came here in 1965, there was family life. You could play, obviously people played football, played cricket there. If you put 4 townhouses with the associated parking, associated bins and so forth, you simply negate what the essence of a court is. Now, I ask you to consider it, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but from a sociological point of view, from a point of view of the quality of life of what we want. Obviously something will get developed there, presumably, but simply this is overdevelopment. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other objectors that would like to speak? Is there the applicant present or a representative of the applicant? Okay. Okay, that the applicant was invited. Yeah, okay. All right, so we don't have the applicant here tonight, so we move straight on to, does any councillor have a question for the officers? All right. Okay.
Can I speak, John?
Are you going to move a motion or?
I want to move a motion to reject the application.
Right, okay, all right.
Speak.
Okay. Do you have grounds for that or?
Well, I've got my reasons and I'm happy to present those.
All right, okay. Yep, all right, but would you like to?
Yeah. Do I need a second? No?
Let's just see the motion first.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it is a bit on the hop, but can I just share something very quickly if I'm allowed?
Okay.
You want me to just read the motion? Well, my motion is to refuse it on the grounds of which I've got a list here. All right. Just share those.
Well, Councillor Yildiz, I asked for some grounds to be prepared earlier for refusal. They're on the screen. If you want to move those, you're welcome to move those.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Okay. All right. So, would you like to read through those so that the residents are aware?
Do we need to? Yeah.
Because they haven't been conveyed to the residents at the moment. And,
the design. Well, the key thing being the design response pass to provide an appropriate response to clause 22.01 and clause 55.021 of the neighbourhood character of the Moreland Planning Scheme. And the existing neighbourhood character, namely the design response introduces 2-storey built form deep into an open rear yard context. In particular, the driveway and built to boundary wall along the eastern boundary affords little opportunity to introduce landscaping to soften the development. And B, the combination of the buildings sitting front, setback and upper levels of dwelling 1 result in an overly dominant visual impact upon the single-storey streetscape. The sitting and setback of the upper level dwelling 1 is not sufficiently recessive behind ground floor walls to reduce building mass when viewed from the street and fail to ensure an appropriate visual transition to the existing single-storey.
I'm happy to second that from the chair. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor?
Yes, now I can. Can I just say, look, just a personal thing. I bought the corner property at Myers and Eastgate Street where I live, and I wasn't able to build a house on there because I had another property, and I ended up convincing my neighbour on the other side to buy the site, and I begged him, please don't build 4 townhouses on that corner site. He could have quite easily built 4. Could have built 4. He ended up building 2. Even though he built 2 townhouses, it still has an impact on us in terms of my kids being, and I love my neighbour, being, conscious of the fact that they can't walk around the house like they used to, and there is a fair bit of views so they can actually see into our living space from the second level of the bedroom. So I've personally had an impact, and I've just had a look at, Flannery Court. I've had a look at the Valdoon Street. I've just done a Google map then again with Councillor Tapnos and shown him. The road is so narrow you barely can get a truck through that, and it is a quiet little court. But can I just say to the Barrett family, Leon, Patricia and Rudy, I really do appreciate you guys being here, because it is your voice we're listening, and this is what we do. We need to reflect the values of what the citizens of Oak Park want. Oak Park at the moment, there are 36 townhouses. It is Oak Park. Sorry, Oak Park is townhouse city to me. There are 36 townhouses up for sale at the moment, and on Saturday, 22 townhouses sold just in Oak Park. There are 23 objections to this. The traffic, we mentioned the cultural heritage, but in particular, I think what's in that street is not what is reflective of what this proposal is going to do. So the zone may allow for 2 stories, but I don't think that this development or proposal does in fact reflect what, once again, what should be there. But in terms of, what else have I written here? So it doesn't reflect it, and the density is over the top. It is a cul-de-sac street, so you just think, how can anyone turn around at the end of that street and do a U-turn and come back, especially if there were cars parked on either side. So you think about the challenges we've got in Gowanbray with some of the main streets. This is a tiny little court. For those of you that don't know this, I've actually door knocked in Flannery Court and at Valdoon Street, so I do actually know where it is. And so I won't be supporting this based on the fact that the developer could reassess this, and if he built 2 nice-looking houses, I reckon he'd make the same amount of money he's looking for without destroying the neighbours. I guess their right to live peacefully, and people have invested big money, and it's not fair what's being proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Diz. As the seconder, I'll just speak briefly. Look, I understand that when you look at the res code, on most things this does fulfil res code. It's compliant. But then we come to neighbourhood character. And when you look at that court and you look at the single story nature of almost all the buildings except for the latest approval, it really does seem to fit out of that area. And so therefore, quite happy with the motion that's been moved by Councillor Yildiz, because it talks about neighbourhood character, it talks about the 2-story built form deep into the open rear yards in context. It talks about, in particular, the driveway that we built to the boundary wall on the eastern boundary, which affords little opportunity to improve landscaping. It talks about a combination of the siting of the front setback and the upper levels of dwelling 1 being overly dominant on the visual character of the area. So for those reasons, I'll be supporting the motion moved by Councillor Yildiz. Just one thing I do want to say, that it is difficult when you're in the Urban Planning Committee, or is now called Planning and Related Matters. One objector mentioned that we are representatives. We are also the planning authority as well. And so therefore, when we're at this table, we need to have grounds. And therefore, I believe that this ground of neighbourhood character is a reasonable one to be able to put forward. We can't just knock things off without having grounds for it. And neighbourhood character is in this area, in particular, because of the court and because of the single-storey nature of the homes, I believe it's a reasonable argument. All right. Now, would anyone like to speak against the refusal motion? Any other person like to speak for the refusal motion? Or?
Yep.
Okay.
So I want to speak in favour of the refusal, and I completely sympathise with the residents. This is something that we have to grapple with as a council. We have unprecedented levels of growth development all over the city, and unfortunately we don't control population growth. It's something that we actually have no influence over. We have the planning scheme, but we can't change any element of the planning scheme unless we get the permission from the state government. And so it's a very challenging situation where we have to enforce all the rules, but we don't get to choose what happens. And it is very, very challenging for a group of councillors because we're all residents as well. We experience the same things that you do. I'm happy to support this refusal, but I'm just telling you that development is happening, and unfortunately we can't control it unless there are some active members at a state level that actually assist and work with council to amend things. And so until that happens, development will continue, and unfortunately it is just a really challenging aspect of our role, and it's something that we recognise and sympathise with what's going on, and like even just the bin situation is just absolutely ridiculous. And I've seen it happen in many, many places, but you know, our ability to influence that isn't even in the scheme. So it's really, really challenging, and I just think that hopefully this will hold up at VCAT, and we can get better outcomes, and we can actually start to change elements of the scheme that do need to change. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers, either for or against the refusal? Okay, being no other speakers, we're going to put the refusal to the vote. That there was a motion that moved by Councillor Udiz and seconded by myself. All those in favour of the refusal? Against? I declare the refusal carried, and I'll ask the officer to outline the process this way forward.
Thank you, councillors and members of the gallery. The council have determined this evening to issue a refusal to grant a planning permit for the construction of 4 dwellings at 11 and 11A Baldoon Court, Noak Park, subject to the conditions contained within the alternative recommendation. As objectors, you will receive a copy of the notice of refusal, as will the permanent applicant. The permanent applicant has 60 days in which to lodge an application to contest council's decision through the Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your attendance. And councillors, that concludes the items on the agenda tonight, so I'll declare the meeting closed. Would you like to have a chat? Group manager would like to have a chat for a few minutes if possible.